All right. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is H1 Joshua Moore. I'm currently serving as one of the leaders of a phenomenal team over at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for the COVID vaccination drive. With me today, I have the distinct honor of introducing a plethora of guests and extremely knowledgeable people about some of the top 10 myths that's been heard around the fleet and around society. Um, Before we get into the top 10 biggest misconceptions, please allow me to introduce the Navy's Surgeon General, Rear Admiral Bruce Gillingham, who's been leading the fight of the Navy Marine Corps team for those deployed and those at the home front against this vicious disease. SG, you want to take it away?
Hey, thanks, Petty Officer Moore, and thanks to our panelists for joining us today to help us get to the bottom of some of the myths that have been out there about the vaccine. And I'd like to thank all those who are taking the time to listen, and hopefully they have an open mind to hear this information because we know how critically important the vaccine is. We've been fighting this virus for more than a year, and I'm sure many of you have. I certainly have seen the terrible damage to individuals' health, to their families, and to our communities. I mean, we have to acknowledge that this disease is, but fortunately, we have a great tool, in our armamentarium to get after this. We finally, after that very difficult year, have a weapon in this fight. When sailors and Marines go into battle, they're all, and in this fight against this vicious, unrelenting adversary, this invisible virus, which we're all on the front lines. We really have, if you think of it, we have biologic body armor against this virus, and so that's really a remarkable thing. Now, I realize getting the virus as an individual, or getting the vaccine rather, is an individual decision. And so if you haven't received it, I'd encourage you to reach out to trusted medical professionals. If the panel today doesn't answer all of your questions, please reach out to whoever you trust for your medical care and discuss those concerns so that you can make a fully informed decision. The life you save might not only be your own. Could be a shipmate, could be a family member, could be a member of the community who you've never met. And so this is a very important consideration. So thank you. I'm going to get out of the way of these phenomenal experts and sit back and listen to the presentation. But again, please keep an open mind, hear what they have to say. And if they don't, and I'm really convinced they're gonna address your concerns. But if you have lingering questions, please reach out to your healthcare professional. HM1, back to you. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Absolutely, it's an honor, SG. Thank you very much. So let's get into these panelists. They're Navy medicine doctors, scientists, researchers, and then we're even joined by somebody from the West Coast, not currently at BUMed, but thank you for filling in today. So please let me get into the myth-busting panel that we have. The first person I would like to introduce is Captain Bob Hawkins. He's the commander of the Navy Marine Corps Public Health Center. We have Captain Matt Weiner, who is BUMed's Assistant Deputy Chief of Research and Development. We have Commander Catherine Luna, who is the Chief of Navy Medicine's Office of Women's Health. We have Commander Richard Gilliard, who is the DFA over at NMRNTC San Diego. And we're also joined by Lieutenant Commander Matthew Hall, who's the BUMed's Public Health Emergency Officer. So now that we got the introductions out of the way, let's get right into it, starting with number 10. Captain Hawkins, if you want to take this one away. Myth number 10, I've already had COVID, so technically shouldn't I already be immune?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And I think that is a great question. And I just want to give a couple of things to think about. And while there is mounting evidence that there's some degree of immunity post-infection with COVID, and that is true, a word I'd like to highlight that I mentioned is some. The other point to consider is there are documented cases of reinfection in those that have had COVID previously. And so when you combine the two things of some immunity and the fact that we know that people can get COVID in certain circumstances again, it is still highly recommended to consider getting the vaccine even if you have had COVID previously. And the last thing I would add on that is the time component. We don't know how long that immunity lasts post-COVID. And so having COVID a year ago, we really have no idea whether you have protection. So really, the best way to ensure the most protection for yourself, frankly, and others is to consider getting the vaccine, even if you've had COVID previously. Over.
All right. Thank you, sir. Moving on to myth number 9. This vaccine, people say that this vaccine wasn't designed with minorities being taken into account. Does anybody want to take a stab at that one?
Yes, I'll take that. This is Lieutenant Commander Hall. So this is absolutely understandable. I think that there is, for whatever reason, there's distrust of the system, whether that's because of personal experience or because of historical cases that we know of where certain minority groups in particular were not considered in the process of developing drugs, or maybe were considered too much. Well, so considering this, the Pfizer and Moderna trials included a wide range of participants from minority groups, male, female. Pfizer on their own included 37,000 participants to receive either the vaccine or placebo. Around 10% identified as Black or African American, 28% identified as Hispanic or Latino. And then for Moderna, they enrolled about 45,000 participants, and 20% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and again about 10% African American or Black. And so while ideally it would have been higher, there was certainly a number of people included in the study demonstrate that it was working in that population, and there would definitely be a benefit.
Greetings, everyone. As Dr. Hall stated, there's legitimate concerns. And however, I've taken both doses of the vaccine. And the reason why I decided to take the vaccine was because of science. My wife and I, we did our research. We watched town halls with credible scientists and doctors, and that gave me the confidence to take the vaccine. My mother, who's 73 years old with pre-existing conditions, called me the other day, actually a couple of weeks ago, asking for my advice. And I encourage her to take the vaccine as well. She's due to take her second dose on the 4th of March. So I fully support and encourage everyone of all races to take the vaccine. Over.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your answers. Moving on to myth number 8, Captain Weiner. This one's probably right up your alley. One of the questions that came up was, we can't trust these COVID-19 vaccinations because they were just manufactured so quickly, or those were rushed. There any truth to that at all?
So I don't think that there is. I think the vaccines in general are a triumph of medicine, that we were able to get a vaccine from the start of the pandemic out into the field deployed to counter the pandemic in such a short period of time. The technology that is being hailed for the vaccines that we have today from Pfizer and from Moderna are being marketed as new technology, as messenger RNA or mRNA technology. But this is technology that's actually decades old at this point and has been used to try to develop a number of vaccines before this, including by the company Moderna, who actually is the producer of one of the vaccines available to us. And it was through their work to make vaccines against the first SARS, against MERS, against influenza, that they were able to capitalize on all of that technology and all of that know-how to be able to produce something so quickly. It really is not something being rushed. It's more about the state of readiness that the biomedical community was in at the time that the pandemic happened. One thing that you can't rush that is really important to foot stomp is the clinical trials that that these companies have to perform that are viewed by the FDA that literally enroll tens of thousands of individuals and then will follow those individuals out for 2 years after they've received their vaccine. Now, obviously, they haven't finished following those people out to that 2-year mark, but they've been looking at them. What allowed these clinical trials to get done so fast is that, one, the companies were well positioned to get out and get them started. They had all the money they needed for their clinical trials. And two, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The amount of virus that's out there in the community is so high that they were able to observe the milestones of the clinical trials much sooner than if they were developing a vaccine for a virus or a pathogen that didn't happen all that often. So, the regrettable thing is we're in a pandemic, but the developers of the vaccine were able to leverage their know-how from decades of experience with the massive amount of infection that was out in the community in general to be able to get these vaccines developed through clinical trials and ultimately, while not yet formally approved by the FDA, authorized for emergency use. And it's worth saying also that I chose to get the vaccine after looking at a lot of the data, the safety data, the efficacy data, the effectiveness of the vaccine, and weighing it against what I thought was a threat to myself, to my family, and to my friends. And there's so many things that I can't control. I didn't want to leave anything on the table that was within my control that could help out myself or my family. Over.
Awesome, sir. Thank you very much for that answer. Moving on into our number 7 myth that we have. This vaccine, a lot of people are saying and thinking that it's not safe for pregnant or lactating women to receive. Is there any truth to this, ma'am?
No, this is definitely a myth. So as a breastfeeding mom myself, I was very excited to receive the COVID vaccine last month. In fact, 20,000 pregnant women in the U.S. received the COVID-19 vaccine with no safety concerns noted yet. It is important to note, however, that COVID-19 testing trials did not include pregnant or breastfeeding women. So the research is not quite there yet. However, pregnant women are entering trials now. Our expert communities, including the Society for Maternal-Fetal Medicine and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, strongly recommend that pregnant individuals receive the vaccine and they have access to COVID-19 vaccines. Based on how these vaccines were made, experts believe they are likely to be safe in pregnancy and in breastfeeding. Since the vaccine does not contain a live virus, there's no risk that the vaccine could directly infect a mom or a baby. We do know, however, that symptomatic pregnant patients with COVID-19 are at increased risk of more severe illness. In fact, they're 5 times more likely to end up in the ICU, the intensive care unit, or on a breathing machine. This is when compared to non-pregnant symptomatic COVID-19 patients. So when you're looking at your risk and you're making the decision on whether or not to get the vaccine, it's really important to look at your individual risk of getting COVID-19 and your safety. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, please talk to your healthcare provider and discuss all options. Over.
Ma'am, thank you so much for that very educated answer. Number 6, sir, Lieutenant Commander Hall, if you want to tag team this with myself as well. People thinking that they shouldn't get the vaccination and they should reserve it for the elderly, so that the younger generation, the younger people, they feel as though they should wait. Is there, what kind of research backs that up, that they should or shouldn't, or knowledge that you have that you can bestow upon us, sir?
Well, I think this is absolutely a very reasonable thing, ethically, intellectually understandable for people to be concerned about maybe taking away a vaccine from a loved one or from somebody else who they perceive, who may be at a higher risk, right? And we certainly see data about the risk to the elderly in the population and other groups. So first of all, it's reasonable to feel like that. But I'll start by saying that in response that that the schema for the distribution of the vaccine and prioritization of who received it was based on lengthy and in-depth conversations about population risk to individuals, and how it could be distributed to make the biggest benefit for the individuals, but also the population. And so, we have to keep this in the context of, when you're vaccinated, not only does it protect you, but it also protects others, right? And the more people get vaccinated, the more protection it is for the entire group. So I think all those pieces kind of came together and into this idea that, like, you're being offered the vaccine for a specific reason, and you've been essentially chosen to help protect yourself and other people. And I think that's what you should have, that perspective when making the decision to receive the vaccine.
Sir, I couldn't agree with you more. There are a couple of things that you hit on in that one. And one of the ones primarily is that we're offered the ability to even get this vaccination. It doesn't matter your age, or there is a tier group, but the fact that I work at Walter Reed and I'm 29, that doesn't make me invincible. Just because I worked in a hospital for however long doesn't mean I have this magical immunity, and that goes for everybody else out there. My wife, the real reason why I got it was because my wife, she's 28, but she works in the public school system. And I don't want to be around, 10,000 people every week that we're vaccinating, brand new people, first doses, second doses, whatever it may be, all the time, exposing myself to them, then bringing it home. While I'm young and healthy, I might be asymptomatic for X amount of years because we don't know how this thing's going to develop. But I don't want to give it to her, and then she goes back to her school system and then gives it to all the children, her peers, her principal, anything like that. And that's just a whole nother sequence of events. So to echo what you're saying, sir, if you have the availability to get your vaccine, just get it. It doesn't matter your age group or how invincible you think you are. Moving on, though. Myth number 5, speaking about the vaccine, of course, there is this theory or whatever it may be out there that this vaccine can and will alter your DNA or your genetic makeup. Captain Weiner, you want to take that one away?
It does not, and I'm stuck being me. There's no changing my DNA. The messenger RNA vaccine or mRNA vaccine. This is the part of the first 2 vaccines that are available to us in the U.S. are based on this technology. But it's really important to foot stomp that mRNA and the mRNA vaccine does not interact with your DNA. For us, our DNA is in the nucleus of our cells, where it is isolated and protected. Evolved that way because we really have to protect our DNA, and we protect it against a number of things, including viruses and other challenges. You have to think of mRNA as a disposable set of directions, whereas your DNA is your master blueprint, and it's locked away because it's so important. But mRNAs are these disposable directions. And in the case of the vaccine, it's a disposable direction for your body to produce part of the virus spike protein. And so the mRNA you receive in your vaccine is injected. It finds its way to a cell. It's inside of a cell, but not inside the nucleus. And for a short period of time, it produces a portion of the spike protein of the virus. Again, it's a portion of a protein, a portion of a piece of the virus. It can't make you sick, but what it does do is signal your immune system that there's something being made that requires an immune response because it's not a part of you. And so you develop an immune response to that spike protein that is the basis of immunity when you receive these mRNA vaccines. But again, messenger RNA does not go to the nucleus, and it never interacts with DNA. Over.
Sir, thank you very much for that. Myth number 4, the COVID-19 vaccination is going to make me sick with COVID-19. Commander Hall, you're laughing about that one. You want to take that one off?
I'd be glad to. So I think that this myth is not unique to the COVID vaccine. We see it with every vaccine that I've ever recommended or talked to a patient about. It's inevitable. Someone will say it's going to make me sick. Same thing happens with flu vaccine every single year. So what's really going on is that your immune system is responding to something foreign, to something it's never seen before, and it's responding the way it should, right? It doesn't mean that you are infected. It just means that it's doing work, it's exercising. So the first time you get a shot, one of the COVID vaccines, it's the first time your immune system's seeing the little proteins that are getting produced, and it has a little bit of a response to it. The second time, it's already prepared and waiting. It's ready for those little proteins to start coming out, and it's going to hit a little bit harder, right? And so you're going to feel it like you may have been infected or that you may have some infection going on, but really it's just your immune system working out, right? So all that being said, if you were to get the vaccine and feel nothing, which some people definitely do, they don't even notice it, that's okay too, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's responding to it differently. But I think in just kind of putting it simply again, we're giving the vaccine to teach your immune system how to fight this virus before it's even seen, right? So that if you do get exposed, you have a charged system ready to attack, right? So, yeah.
Awesome, sir. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us. So far, we're down to our top 3 myths of our top 10. Number 3, since COVID-19 survival rate is so high, I don't think I really need the vaccine. Do I, Captain Hawkins?
Yeah, so, there's a couple ways, and again, just to give you some things to think about, and then I'll talk about a little bit how I thought about it when I decided to get vaccinated and why. But, while it is true that fortunately, percentage-wise, the fatality rate from COVID disease right now is not super high, but there's been 1.7 million people across the world that have died. That's a lot of people. And the fact is, none of us know if we get COVID, if we're going to be the one that gets severe illness. Even when you're young, there's many documented cases of people getting severe COVID. Also, frankly, none of us know the long-term effects of getting COVID. And so even in those that are relatively asymptomatic or symptomatic, there could be long-term effects that we just don't know. And there's some evidence that could occur. So on an individual basis, getting vaccinated is the best way to increase the chance of you having a healthy life, right? So it's an individual point. The other is we get vaccines certainly to protect ourselves against illness, but we also, in the process of doing that, protect others. So there's a good reason that vaccines work in a population, and they work because they reduce the chance of others, including the unvaccinated, from getting COVID disease. So I'll give you an example myself. I got the vaccine, frankly, as soon as it was offered to me. And my dad lives in the area. In fact, he just recently moved in with us really at the height of COVID. And I'm a healthcare provider. I come and go, and I worried a little bit, frankly, about transmitting COVID to my dad, who's healthy, and he's not so worried about it. But the fact of the matter is, I was and am. And so the vaccine is really the only way we have right now, long term, of preventing us spreading COVID back and forth between each other. So please consider getting the vaccine, first for yourself, but secondarily for others. Over.
Well said, sir. Thank you very much. Commander Luna, I have a question for you. The number 2 myth is, will the COVID-19 vaccination affect my ability or my wife's ability to have kids in the future?
No, great question. Thank you. This absolutely is a myth. So the COVID-19 vaccine will not affect fertility in the short or the long term. So for women who are actively trying to get pregnant, you can still get vaccinated. And if you have been vaccinated, there's no reason to delay pregnancy once you complete the series. So we talked about this a little bit already, but the COVID vaccine works by training our bodies to develop antibodies to fight the COVID-19 virus and to prevent future illness. So there's no evidence at all that antibodies formed from the COVID-19 vaccine will cause any problems with pregnancy, with the development of a placenta, or in any kind of efforts in getting pregnant later. So that's really important to note. And again, the COVID-19 vaccines do not contain that live virus, so they do not alter human DNA, and so they will not cause genetic changes such as infertility. So for women and men who wish to get pregnant in the near or distant future, they can absolutely receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Over.
All right, ma'am, thank you very much. We are at our number one, and for this list at least, our final myth that we are going to debunk today. Lieutenant Commander Hall, if you want to take this one away, that the pandemic will be over very soon. So are we just going to be able to hit like a light switch now that we have our vaccine and go back to normal, or what?
Yes, so I think that we all want things to go back to normal. I think we would love for it just to be a switch to hit, get the vaccine, everything's good to go. Unfortunately, it's going to take some time. I think we see that in the future. I think everybody who works on this sees a future in which things will return to normal. The thing is, it's going to take time to get there, right? And we have to work our way to that point, right? One of those things is receiving the vaccine, right? The Surgeon General mentioned the biological body armor, right? You wear it. That's one part of what we can do to stop this pandemic and return to normal. But we have to do it. Everybody needs that body armor on to get it to stop. I think that so initial evidence looks like we'll need about 70% of the population, around that, to either have immunity by infection or by immunization. Obviously, immunization is safe, infection is not, right? So so getting everybody to that point with vaccination is really the way we need to go about it. We would love to be able to pump it out as quickly as possible and have everybody vaccinated at the same time. Unfortunately, it's just not possible. Manufacturers are doing everything they can to produce the vaccine as quickly as possible. The U.S. government, NAVMed, and all of us are working as hard as we can to get the vaccine out to everyone and into arms as fast as we can. But like I said, ultimately, it's going to take time because vaccine can only be produced so much, and we have a lot of people who need it, honestly. So, again, going back to this biological body armor metaphor, I think it kind of wraps up everything here in that, we have this pandemic where infections are occurring everywhere. And I kind of think about that as maybe like the rate of enemy fire, right? You have fire coming in just all over the place, right? So you put on your body armor, right? But while it's still coming in hot, you got to do other things too, right? Get behind your embankment, take cover, right? Wear your headgear, do everything like that. And so while we're in this full-blown pandemic, we got to continue doing the other things that we do to protect ourselves and others, right? So get vaccinated, right? Put on that body armor, wear your mask, your face coverings, right? Wash your hands, physical distancing. If you're not feeling right, notify your doctor, don't go in. Right, so we got to continue doing those things until we can bring that rate of fire down, and start returning to normal.
Awesome, sir. Thank you all very much, everybody. Distinguished panel, I appreciate all the wisdom and guidance that you have given to us today. I'm just going to wrap things up so we can wrap this whole thing up. Everybody who's tuned in, thank you all for educating yourself, or taking the time to educate yourself so you can educate your peers and those around you. Knowledge is power, especially in this one. So everybody needs to know that, not just as medical professionals or medical personnel, but everybody in general, this vaccination, it's going to save lives. It's important to the preservation, to our health and our readiness, and just the way that we can give back to the way we were doing things and essentially, again, save lives. So I'm going to quote the Surgeon General on this one. I got it written down on a nice little sticky note because I cannot speak as well as him, but we are fully in this fight, in this war. The war against a disease that kills more fellow Americans than those who have perished as a result of World War II. So with that being said, everybody, thank you all for your time. Just as one team in one fight, we'll be able to beat COVID and end this thing. Thank you all very much.